Russia, the world's largest country, has a rich and complex history that spans from early Slavic settlements to its current role as a global superpower. The nation's vast geography, spanning both Europe and Asia, has significantly influenced its history, culture, and politics. Russia's history is marked by expansion, autocratic rule, revolutions, and its transformation into a global power. Will explore Russia's evolution through the centuries, from its early days as a collection of city-states to the rise of the Russian Empire, the Soviet Union, and its post-Soviet transformation. Early settlements and the Kievan Rus, 9th–13th century. Russia's early history begins with the East Slavs, who settled in the region between the 6th and 8th centuries. These tribes formed small, self-governing communities, and by the 9th century, Scandinavian Viking traders and warriors, known as Varangians, had established trade routes along the rivers of Eastern Europe. The Varangians founded the city of Novgorod and eventually moved south to establish the Kievan Rus state, centered in Kiev, modern-day Ukraine. The Kievan Rus was a loose federation of Slavic and Finno-Ugric peoples under the rule of the Varangian princes. It became one of the most powerful political entities in Eastern Europe, especially during the reign of Prince Vladimir the Great, 980–1015. In 988, Vladimir converted to Orthodox Christianity, making it the state religion and aligning Kievan Rus with the Byzantine Empire, which had a profound influence on Russian culture, art, and religious life. The Kievan Rus gradually fragmented due to internal strife and external threats. By the 13th century, it had splintered into various principalities, each ruled by a local prince. This political disunity made the region vulnerable to the Mongol invasion. The Mongol invasion and the rise of Moscow, 13th–15th century. In the early 13th century, the Mongols, under the leadership of Batu Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan, invaded and conquered most of the Kievan Rus territories. The Mongols established the Golden Horde, a Mongol Turkic state that controlled much of Eastern Europe, including Russia. The Rus princes were forced to pay tribute to the Mongol Khans, and the Mongol occupation lasted for nearly 250 years, stifling economic and political development in the region. During the Mongol era, the city of Moscow, Muscovy, began to rise in prominence. In 1325, Ivan I of Moscow secured the title of Grand Prince, by cooperating with the Mongols and using his wealth and influence to consolidate power. Over the next century, the rulers of Moscow expanded their territory and centralized authority. By the late 15th century, under the rule of Ivan III, Ivan the Great, Moscow had become the dominant power in the region. Ivan III declared independence from the Mongols in 1480, effectively ending their control over Russia. He also married Sophia Paleologina, a Byzantine princess, and adopted the double-headed eagle as a symbol of Russia's continuity with the fallen Byzantine Empire. The Russian Tsardom and Ivan the Terrible, 16th century, Ivan IV, known as Ivan the Terrible, became the first ruler of Russia to assume the title of Tsar, in 1547. His reign marked the beginning of the centralized Russian Tsardom and the expansion of the Russian state. Ivan IV is best remembered for his policies of territorial expansion and his reign of terror against the nobility, boyars, whom he suspected of plotting against him. Ivan IV's reign saw significant territorial expansion, particularly into the Khanates of Kazan and Astrakhan, extending Russian control over the Volga River and opening the way for further expansion into Siberia. However, Ivan's later years were marked by paranoia, brutal repression, and the Oprichnina, a secret police force that terrorized and executed his enemies. Ivan's death in 1584 led to a period of instability known as the Time of Troubles, 1598–1613, characterized by political chaos, foreign invasions, and famine. The crisis ended with the establishment of the Romanov dynasty in 1613. The Romanov dynasty and Imperial Russia, 1613–1917. The Romanov dynasty, which would rule Russia for over 300 years, began with the election of Michael Romanov as Tsar in 1613. The early Romanovs worked to stabilize the country and rebuild its economy, but Russia remained a largely feudal and agrarian society. Peter the Great, 1682–1725, was one of Russia's most transformative rulers. Determined to modernize and westernize Russia, Peter embarked on a series of reforms that touched every aspect of Russian life. He built a new capital, St. Petersburg, on the Baltic Sea, which became Russia's window to the west. He also modernized the military, created a navy, and reformed the government bureaucracy to centralize power in the monarchy. Peter's legacy was continued by Catherine the Great, 1762 to 1796, who expanded Russian territory and promoted the ideas of the Enlightenment. Under Catherine's reign, Russia became one of the most powerful nations in Europe, extending its borders through wars with the Ottoman Empire and Poland, and continuing the expansion into Siberia and Alaska. By the 19th century, Russia was a vast empire, stretching from Europe to the Pacific Ocean. However, it remained a largely autocratic state, with the Tsars maintaining absolute power and the majority of the population living in poverty as serfs. Efforts to reform the system, such as the emancipation of the serfs in 1861 by Alexander II, were met with resistance from conservative forces and were insufficient to prevent growing social unrest. The Russian Revolution and the Soviet Union, 1917 to 1991, the 20th century brought unprecedented change to Russia. The pressures of World War I, combined with internal social and political discontent, led to the collapse of the Romanov dynasty and the Russian Empire. In February 1917, the Russian Revolution forced Tsar Nicholas II to abdicate, ending centuries of autocratic rule. A provisional government took over, but it was short-lived. In October 1917, the Bolsheviks, a radical socialist group led by Vladimir Lenin, seized power in what became known as the October Revolution. The Bolsheviks established a communist government, and in 1922, they formally created the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR, with Russia as its largest and most dominant republic. The Soviet Union, under Lenin and later Joseph Stalin, rapidly industrialized and collectivized agriculture, but at the cost of millions of lives. Stalin's regime was marked by purges, forced labor camps, the Gulag system, and the cult of personality. Despite these repressive measures, the USSR became a global superpower, especially after its victory in World War II. During the Cold War, 1947 to 1991, the Soviet Union and the United States were locked in a geopolitical struggle for global dominance. The USSR extended its influence over Eastern Europe and supported communist movements worldwide, leading to proxy wars and political tension across the globe. By the 1980s, the Soviet Union was facing economic stagnation, and in 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev introduced reforms like glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring, in an attempt to revitalize the system. However, these reforms ultimately led to the weakening of the Soviet state. In 1991, the Soviet Union dissolved, and Russia emerged as an independent country. Post-Soviet Russia, 1991-present, the collapse of the Soviet Union marked a new era for Russia. The 1990s, under President Boris Yeltsin, were a time of political and economic turmoil, as Russia transitioned from a planned economy to a market-based system. This period saw the rise of oligarchs, widespread corruption, and a significant decline in living standards for many Russians. In 1999, Vladimir Putin became the acting president of Russia, and he has since played a dominant role in Russian politics. Putin's leadership has been characterized by efforts to reassert Russia's global influence, a centralization of power in the presidency, and growing authoritarianism. Under Putin, Russia has engaged in conflicts such as the Second Chechen War, the 2008 war with Georgia, and the annexation of Crimea in 2014, which led to sanctions from Western countries. Despite challenges, including international isolation and economic sanctions, Putin has maintained significant support within Russia, largely due to his image as a strong leader who restored stability and national pride after the chaotic 1990s. Conclusion: the history of Russia is one of immense change and complexity, shaped by autocratic rule, revolution, and global conflict. From its origins as a loose federation of Slavic tribes to its role as a global superpower, Russia has repeatedly transformed itself. Today, Russia continues to play a critical role in international affairs, and its history serves as a reminder of the enduring influence of geography, culture, and politics on the development of nations.